Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Iraqi forces claim gains in the ISIL-held city of Mosul, but the militant group is not going down without a fight. What does this long-drawn battle spell for Iraq? And China sees a record number of voluntary organ donors. What brought about this change in sentiment? We begin today's show in the Iraqi city of Mosul, where a long-awaited battle is undergoing. The Mosul offensive, launched on Monday, might just be the beginning of the end of military group ISIL, some say. Iraqi forces, Kurdish military, and the U.S.-led coalition have all joined forces to liberate ISIL's main stronghold in Iraq. With as many as 30,000 pro-government forces in the fight, will the takeover be successful or an easy one?
ISIL took control of Iraq's second biggest city 2 years ago. Combined forces are now on a mission to take it back.
Up to now, 200 square meters have been liberated. This is the first phase of the Mosul operation. It has started from the east and from the southeast of Mosul, and it is a joint operation between the Peshmerga forces and the Iraqi army.
Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga troops, aided by multinational special forces and U.S.-led airstrikes, are advancing toward Mosul from the east and south. That is pushing ISIL operatives west to Syria, but they're not going without a fight. ISIL suicide bombers are ambushing advancing troops, and there's broad speculation the extremist group has set booby traps throughout Mosul.
Peshmerga forces say they've secured hundreds of kilometers and numerous villages in the Mosul area. But beyond the threat of IEDs, suicide bombings, and booby traps, one of the largest looming threats is to civilians who are in a no-win situation. They're being told to stay at home and cut their gas lines, but if they stay put, they run the risk of getting caught in the crossfire.
1.5 million people live in the Mosul area. They've already started leaving their homes. Aid agencies warn a mass exodus could present the world's biggest humanitarian crisis this year. Despite reports that the offensive is running, quote, ahead of schedule, a lengthy battle lies ahead. An estimated 5,000 to 7,000 ISIL fighters remain in Mosul. Commanders say the offensive to get them out could take weeks or months. Stephanie Fried, CCTV, Baghdad, Iraq.
To discuss the battle for Mosul and its complexities, at least in Beijing studio, we have Mr. Li Guofu, who is the director of the Center for Middle East Studies in the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, in London, we are joined by Dr. Mowafaq al-Rubai, who is member of the Iraqi parliament and also a former national security advisor of that country. Welcome, sir. Joining us from Washington, D.C. in the United States, Mr. Kurt Volker, former U.S. ambassador to NATO and also CEO of the McCain Institute for International Leadership. Welcome as well, Mr. Ambassador. May I start with you, Dr. Rubai from Iraq? It's easy, quote unquote, to take the city, but how to maintain the control of the city, not to mention the peace building and the rebuilding of the city and of your country, are the biggest questions facing all of us today. What is your take?
I certainly agree with what you said. There is a huge preparation, number one, for taking the city, and we're prepared for a long fight, and we have prepared the logistical support for the next 6 to 9 months. We are fully prepared now. Also, although we believe that we will retake the city on this side of Christmas, hopefully, but we are prepared for all sort of ends, if you like. The humanitarian aid is the biggest challenge, because we don't know where is this 1.5 million people are going to flood north, south, east, west, and we have to prepare to receive 1.5 million people in these four directions. This is number one. Number two is we don't want them, because there are some strong signs that and indicators that Daesh or ISIS are going to use them as a human shield, and they're going to get in the crossfire, and we don't want that at all. We want them either to flee the city or to stay indoors. And there are good signs now that there are people from within Mosul are rebelling against ISIS, and that will make life much easier for the Iraqi army, Popular Mobilization Forces, federal police, as well as the Peshmerga from Kurdistan region.
Ambassador Volker, I have to put the same question to you. You know the complexity of the battleground, of course, but even more than that, that is the sustainability of peace in the city. May I ask you a question one by one, and may I have some quick answer from you? Deconstruct the answer of earlier Dr. Rube, what he said. First of all, 5 to 6 months, President Obama already left the White House at that moment. So, will the next White House having the similar policy that would make sure to continue the battle?
Yes, I do not think that whether it is Hillary Clinton, which is most likely, or even if it's Donald Trump, you'll see an abrupt change to this operation. No president is going to try to tear up an ongoing military support like this.
Secondly, what about the longer term planning? Retake city, but at the same time make sure there's peace. There's also the locals that are guarding the peace. How is that likely to happen?
This is really a great question. It is not clear at all at this point exactly how this will play out. You have the Iraqi government forces that want to retake Mosul and then govern Mosul. You have the Peshmerga forces that are very effective on the ground, and the Kurds have also had a claim to Mosul and will have some interest in the way it is governed. You have Shia militias, which are very unwelcome in Mosul, and yet they've been critical to the Iraqi government effort. You have local Sunni tribes that are very skeptical of the Iraqi government and of the Kurds. And I don't know that any of this has been put together in a way forward for the governance of Mosul.
All right, number three, 1.5 million people. Those are the civilians, of course, in the city of Mosul, fleeing the battleground. What's going to happen to them? Who are going to take them?
Yeah, we really don't know. The safest surrounding territory is in the Kurdish region. And so it is quite possible many of them would flee to the Kurdish region. However, being a majority Sunni Arab population, they may not feel comfortable in the long run being there, and they may try to flee to some of the Sunni areas where the tribal leadership lives, or because the Iraqi army is going to be the liberating force, it may just be because of the conflict zones itself, the easiest path to go where the Iraqi army has come from. So as your previous speaker said, it's very unclear where they're going to go.
Last but certainly not least for this round, a quick question and answer, Ambassador Volker. What about make sure they are not going to be used as human shields by the terrorists?
They will be used as human shields by the terrorists. It can't be prevented. They control the city right now. They will threaten to kill them if they move. They will kill some of them on their own anyway. It's just going to be a very difficult part of the operation to preserve as much life as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. You've been attentively listened to your two other colleagues when they are discussing the issues on the ground and in the longer term. From your perspective, looking at from China, of course, the Iraq war was at the very beginning very controversial, and many have already believed, including President Obama, about the necessity at the very beginning to even conduct this war. But the thing is, what to do next? Is so-called the retake of Mosul from the ISIL likely to put one more piece of peace in that country?
I think at this moment, as I said, at the very beginning, there could be some very controversial about whether American or the British were right to to conduct this war. But it is a common knowledge now in the West, that was huge mistakes made by the former president and the former prime minister. As a few the future about the Mosul in general and the Iraq in general, I think as the previous two speakers has admitted that definitely I think the Mosul will be taken by the Iraqi army. The major questions or the major challenges the Iraqi or the governments face is how to rebuild, how to retake the reconciliation process, because we know that this area is rich not only in oil resources, but also I think is rich in ethnic or religious factions.
To say the least.
Yeah, that is, there are several, the political functions has already claimed the rights to, to hold this area. How, to rebuild this area. It is a big challenges, I think, facing the Iraqi government.
Before we go to some of the detail you have just said, Mr. Li, let me go back to Dr. Rubey to ask you some specific questions. At this moment, it is still the battleground that we are talking about. President Obama from the United States, since he came into the office, his idea was supposed to put the local forces in the front line, and while the Americans being of support. But has that worked, and will that work in this specific case of retake of Mosul? It's a big question. Dr. Rubey, what do you make of it?
Well, what I call the reckless withdrawal of the Americans at the end of 2011 is one of the reasons why ISIS has prevailed in the north and western part of the country. But I think what happened to us in the last 2.5 years, we have managed to rehabilitate, reconstruct more than 50% of the Iraqi army. There is a new concept which your other guest called Shia militia, is what I call the popular mobilization forces, and they are under the leadership of the commander-in-chief, and they are part and parcel of the Iraqi security forces now. They are marching also. We have managed to liberate more than 80% of the territory the ISIS has managed to occupy in June 2014. Now I think this is the last stronghold of ISIS, and this is and Iraq will prevail definitely at the end, and whether on this side of the Christmas or on the early next year.
Well, what you say, sir, in the end, of course, it gives us a hope, but at the same time, it gives us a question mark as to how much of an extension of time this will be. So may I ask you even more specifically at this moment about the Americans' role toward this retake of Mosul? You've got 200 to 300 special American forces via radio guiding the Iraqi forces. You also have intelligence, Apache pilots, and some of the other who are doing support to the Iraqi troops. How significant are they, Dr. Rubey, from Iraqi's perspective, are these American forces and their so-called support? What would that mean for the success eventually? Can you, Iraqi forces, work on your own?
Coalition forces presence in Iraq now is pivotal and very important for the previous operations and for this operation. The air support is very important. Intelligence sharing is extremely important. Training, logistical support, provision of arms, and all sort of planning. These are important parts of the operation, and we need them. But who is going to carry the fight on the ground? Who has been carrying the fight on the ground and liberating more than 80% of the territory occupied in 2014 is the Iraqis, the Iraqi army, the Iraqi Federal Police, the Popular Mobilization Forces, and the Peshmerga as well.
Well, Ambassador Volker, despite what Dr. Rubey just said, half of the 5,000 almost American forces on the ground will participate directly into retake the city of Mosul in one way or the other. At the very beginning, remember, Ambassador Volker, the reason why President Obama and the American people chose the way that it is, which is to have the Iraqis and the locals on the front line, is because the Americans don't want to sacrifice directly the lives of the American troops. That's going to be very controversial inside your country. So, with almost half of the troops involved anyway directly, can the purpose be served? Ambassador Volker.
Yes, and I would say, first off, I agree with a great deal of what Dr. Roubaix said. I think he laid it out very well. Second, even with 2,500 troops, the U.S. could not do this as the United States. We're only able to play a role in supporting the Iraqi authorities. Third, the withdrawal was only partly to avoid American casualties in Iraq. Another aspect of this that President Obama focused on was the massive presence of American forces being a cause of fighting against that presence. And so he wanted to dramatically reduce that footprint. All that being said, what you've asked through your questions is correct. The U.S. role in this battle and in supporting the Iraqi forces is now much more substantial than what President Obama has really acknowledged or presented to the American people. We've presented the withdrawal, but in reality, we are now there not only with airstrikes, but as you said, also with helicopters, with intelligence, with spotters, with special forces who are communicating, that are embedded and are communicating with each other, and indeed taking part in some of the fighting. It's a more substantial role, but it is still a support role.
Okay, certainly it is not just ISIL, not just Iraq, and not just the United States that are the key players on the ground. There are several other key players. That is really the complex picture that we're talking about, gentlemen. Right now, there are 30,000 pro-government forces consisting of the Iraqi army, Sunni tribal fighters, and Kurdish military with air support from the US-led coalition. Now let us understand the relations between those fighting against the ISIL. Among them, see this complicated relation. U.S. is pro-Iraqi government, of course. The Kurdish forces are also favored ally. Turkey, another country, always want to be involved, is training Sunni tribal fighters, not to mention the role of Iran and some of the others that are actually playing indirectly on the region. Sir Lee, I have to leave this very complicated question to you. So many players. President Obama wants the Iraqis to call the shots, but so many other players want to really call the shots. What's going on?
I think this is something, it's very hard to predict at this moment. It mainly depends on how I think the battle itself are going on. If, suppose, the battle is ran quite smoothly as according to the strategy, planned by the Iraqi government. As the Iraqi Prime Minister Abadi said that, only the Iraqi forces, the army, the policemen can, has the rights to go inside the Mosul city and also manage, the order of the city after, when the battle was finished. If, the battle did not run according to what they had planned, then I think, the situation would be more complicated because you need, all these forces to go together inside the countries. And Turkey has already made it clear that, they would have the right to decide what the Mosul would be afterwards.
Well, Ambassador Volker, the complexity of it is so many players, regional, international, also within the country, beyond the border. What does the United States make of this complex picture? If the U.S. not necessarily going to be sustainably involved in this, what's likely to happen? But if you are, what kind of things is the U.S. dragging itself into?
Yeah. My own view is that I think the U.S. needs to be deeply involved in this. We will be affected by the outcome dramatically, however things turn out. ISIS has certainly made the United States and our values, our freedom, democracy, a principal target of their attacks. The people in the region are going to have a difficult time overcoming their differences on their own, and I think the U.S. as well as others can play a role in helping to stabilize this. I think we are kidding ourselves in the United States if we think we can have a minimal role and just target ISIS and not worry about the bigger picture.
But
I think you're gonna have to be
Ambassador
a lot
Volker,
more
Ambassador Volker,
substantial.
there are debates inside your capital about this. Some say very small role, as small as possible. Others, as you say, we have to play so-called the necessary role. Is that likely to continue that debate, or one side is going to take the stronghold?
It's going to continue, and even in the scenario where Hillary Clinton becomes president and she talks about having a more robust policy, even within her own administration, you're going to have those very same debates. It's not a clear-cut position from one side or the other in Washington.
Dr. Rubey, very important question for you as well. The ISIL could be driven away. Mosul could be taken at this moment with efforts. And yet the question is, how will that impact on the evolvement of Mosul, ISIL rather? We have seen Al-Qaeda, for example, in Afghanistan, has evolved as a result of anti-terrorist campaigns by different forces. So maybe not ISIL anymore next time it's called something else. It's the same, even more dangerous, some would say. From Iraqi's perspective, what do you make of the nature of this fight now?
I certainly agree with that. And before I pick up your question, I need to talk about the multiple player in the region.
Go ahead, sir.
We need to see some more pressure from the United States of America on the Turks to withdraw their troops from inside Iraq. We need to see some pressure from the American on their Gulf allies in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar to stop funding terrorists in Iraq and Syria. Now, taking your question and what is after that, what is after ISIS is extremely important. Number one, the government of Iraq is prepared to go really the extra mile and go for a real national reconciliation program. This is after reconstruction and normalization, and then putting a local government in place and local police in place and everything in place. We need to stop this ideological challenge. This is not only a security challenge. This is a new religion. This is called a new faith. This is an evil faith of exclusion and hatred. Now we need to call this and the ideological challenge, and the world is turning a blind eye to this ideological challenge, which is coming from the ideology or theocracy called Wahhabism. We need to address this, and we need to dry it out in their sources inside Saudi Arabia.
I see. Before we go to Mr. Lee for the final words, let me come back to you, Ambassador Volker, very briefly to respond to your Iraqi counterpart. His demand that the U.S. role and U.S. talk to the regional players, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and some of the others. Can you?
Well, I would phrase it slightly differently. I understand where he's coming from, but I think we need Turkey and Saudi Arabia also to be part of a solution. And he sees them as taking territory supporting terrorists. They do have their own networks and connections inside the region as well. And we need everybody to be pulling towards a defeat of ISIS and a reestablishment of security and building a lasting political settlement.
All right, Mr. Lee, final words from you as well. China, as member of P5 of the Security Council, of course, working hard on the Iraqi issue. But now when you see a battleground like this, and so many issues all entangled together, the future?
I think, first, we are fully supported the Iraqi, decision to take, the Mosul. Then we also calling on, all, the players, as I say that, try to unite it, the first priority is to defeat the ISIL. Then, I think, to make the rebuild of the country. We hope, the Iraqi, very successful, and the best wishes is that, afterwards, they can concentrate all the efforts to rebuild the countries.
Right. Well, that's likely to be a very long and hard-fought battle that we are talking about here. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for helping us understand the latest situation on the ground and many of the complexities involved in this fight. Li Guofu, Dr. Muwafaq Al-Rubey, and Kurt Volker. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Appreciate it. Stay with us here on World Insight, still to come. Is there life after death? The answer is yes for the many organ donors in China. But how will the country ensure transparency and fairness in a system still relatively unknown? Welcome back. We now turn to a topic that might still be considered a taboo to some: organ donation. But things are changing in China. The country has seen a spike in the number of donors in recent years, as just in the year 2015, last year alone, China banned the harvest of organs from executed prisoners. Since then, voluntary donations are the only legitimate source of organ transplantation in China.
Chinese health officials share the country's organ donation principles with international experts at a conference in Beijing. Organ donation in China must be voluntary and unpaid. No hospitals or doctors can decide on who will be the recipient of a specific donated organ. And living organ donations are strictly limited between relatives.
China's regulations, systems and standards for organ transplantation have been brought in line with WHO's guiding principles.
In the first 9 months of 2016, China completed nearly 3,000 organ donations, marking a 50% increase from the same time last year. Now, China's annual number of organ donations ranks first in Asia and third in the world after the US and Brazil.
We did an online survey with more than 41,000 respondents. 45% of them said they were willing to become organ donors. The remaining 55% said they still know little about our system. They don't trust us yet. They need a sound legal system. They need an end to organ trading.
China has established a computer allocation system called the China Organ Transplantation Response System to ensure transparency and fairness. The system works on the principles of urgency, compatibility and patient need, and it has allocated 17,000 organs since the establishment in 2013.
And for more discussion about that sensitive and in fact very important topic, we're joined here in the Beijing studio Dr. Wang Haibo, who is the director of the China Organ Transplant Response System. Welcome, sir. And also Professor Marty Manalik, who is the president of the International Society for Organ Donation and Procurement. Welcome as well, Professor.
Thank you.
Professor Manalik, let me ask you about this. There has been a lot of debates in the international press, at least, about what exactly are the realities in China. Before I go to Dr. Wang, I want to have your views, because your observation is independent from the Chinese system. Accusations about China having, the prisoners forced to donate their organs related to human rights issues, this and that. What exactly are the realities?
Well, we have been hearing for our professional life that was the traditional practice in China to get organs, for many years. But our intervention in China starts in 2009, attending the meetings, start to see how worried they are in changing for the new system. And since then, we have been the evolution. How was the situation in 2009? Traditional donors, as you said, was the source of organs. Until today, that the situation, as you mentioned, have been changed completely since 2015.
Okay, well, Dr. Wang, from China's perspective, what the realities are?
The reality is China stopped using the prison organ as of January 1st, 2015. So that's the start of new system. And now, since then, we have the jump start of the organ donation based on the voluntary, community-based deceased donors. So now in 2015, we have more than 2,766 donors. In this year, we have 50% jump, and we already have approaching 3,000 as of last month. So we are expecting around 4,000 donors in this year. We are approaching the second place in the world.
Where did you get your number?
That's based on our national organ allocation system. China organ transplant response system we developed during the last several years.
All right, the new page both of you mentioned, which is to refuse the forced donation or the illegal process of donating from the prisoners. That starts from the first day of last year, 2015. The question is, what about the enforcement? How would you know, Dr. Wang? Have you and your colleagues go into localities, look at exactly what's going on there?
Well, first, the WHO requires the traceability of each organs, which means we must establish a national system to track where organ came from or where organ goes. So that is our national organ allocation computer system, which is to fulfill this requirement from WHO.
So you know exactly where it comes from?
Yes.
And from whom?
Yes.
Under what circumstances?
Yes, at individual level.
Is that also your observation?
Yes, because you was very lucky that last summer in August, international delegation from the WHO, from the Transplantation Society, and from the Istanbul Declaration, we visit several hospitals in China. Independently, they said, you go, you talk with the people, you come back.
Which city did you visit?
Well, we visit many. We visit Shanghai, we visit Peking, we visit Xi'an, Wuhan, Hangzhou, and we visit like more than 10 hospitals, all
so
three,
that's in different
10
parts
days, 10 days in all
country.
China. And what we observed is that there was a starting a system, in some places more than in others. There was in China the great interest to work on that, and a great interest to learn about the new system. No?
Yes, the new system is absolutely welcomed, not only here in China, but also internationally. The question is, what about the demands? There has always been a huge deficit between what is needed and what are being offered. I mean, when it comes to numbers, take a look at this large disparity between the number of people who say they support organ donation and also the number of people who actually register to be a donor. This is very interesting human behavior. In the UK, for example, opinion polls suggest that 9 out of 10 people support organ donations, but fewer than 1 in 3 people are registered. So this is in the UK alone, but in China, people would probably see similar logics. As experts, how would you make of these kind of practices? Is there hope to encourage people to be donors, large number of them? Dr. Wang?
Yes, I think that's
what you're doing here in China every day, right?
Yes, but I think there's a difference between people agreed for organ donation and the people who make the decision. A difference between the awareness and decision making, and also I think the most powerful force in the universe is convenience. Yes, people want to donate, but we must make it feasible for people to register as the volunteer for donor. And when it fits the death, actually they have different kind of the situation to make decision, and that rely on a very effective donation system. It's very complicated. It's a professional issues, and that's what we are working for. That is Professor Mati and other international society members are helping China to build on.
Professor Maya Lik, what are the key factors?
Let me explain about the information that you give about UK. It's true, but it's partially true, because 1 of 10 maybe is against donation. Only 1/3 in the registry. But how much, when they ask the people about donation at the time of death, also is different, because only 50% accepts. It's more than the people registry. See, the registry by itself is not a driving of the donation. The driving is when you or your relative, someone die, the picture approaching, explaining what is the situation, that is the key point. And I tell another example. People from UK looking for the sun, they go to Spain for holidays, or they are retired. When these people die in Spain, they accept donation the same as a Spanish citizen, 85%. When they die in UK, they accept only 50.
You're coming from Spain, aren't you?
So I'm coming from Spain.
There's some bias against the British people, I think. No, jokes aside.
But just joking, because that happened also with the German people going that. But that means it's not only the registry, it's not the driving. There is a Eurostat registry. What is the opinion of the Spanish people around organ donation? And you know what is the result? 70% support in life in a survey. But at time of dying, they support more, really 85% than the survey. Because one is a survey, what is your opinion in life, or whatever, the population, but what is the time of dying, if you have to inform well the grieving, what is the situation, people understand.
But Dr. Wang, Professor Mayalik is talking about the Europeans. Well, there might be very different culture and traditions inside the European countries, but in China, particularly in Asian countries, people believe in this afterlife and this and that, and maintain a whole body when the person passed away is extremely important, according to some tradition. So you're not just fighting with, how can we encourage people to make that donation, but also some of the long-believed traditions.
Yes, I think first I need to point out that Spain is #1 in the world in terms of organ donation rate. They have the best system.
No wonder the president is coming from the country of Spain.
Yes, well,
there we go.
Yes,
but 2 years only.
What Mati just said described two things. Why people want to donate depend on the efficiency of the donation system, and the second thing is most important, the trust on the system. So yes, people are thinking about Chinese culture, have this traditional thinking, which is the barrier of organ donation. But the problem is we never ask people, and we never have a system to facilitate people, to honor people's wish if they want to donate. So we just started.
Or to let them observe the transparency of the system so they can trust the system.
Exactly. That's we have the survey by the media that we have 44.7% actually agreed on organ donation, and 45 of them said no, and we want to know why they say no, because 60% of people who said no, they said we didn't trust the system.
Okay, if I could just make a comparison, blood donation in China has been a big issue also. There has been a big deficit, if not as big as organ donation, but certainly a big one in this country. Even if it is very convenient, you see the blood donation trucks everywhere in the big shopping malls in front of them and in the big cities everywhere. But still, there has such a big deficit between needs and provision. So the question is, will the donation system that you have just said, will the convenience you have just said, Dr. Wang, and also the trust you have just said, Dr. Wang, really likely to solve the problem for a country as big as 1.3 billion people?
Yes, I believe so, because that's the goal of WHO. It's a global goal of the professionals. We should achieve self-sufficiency, which means each country should have the ability to have donation system to supply to their people who need that. And that rely on the people's trust, and that trust need transparency. Also, we need to tell people's story. Yesterday, I met a donor family. Who herself is a doctor, and she told us how much she misses her husband. And everybody, the media, the reporters, the professional, burst into tears. That is very powerful to let people to think about the value of life. The organ donation is about death. But when you're talking about death, which is taboo of Chinese society, people start thinking about the value of the life. So that's something is positive for this society.
Well, certainly awareness and also campaign could help with the job, but international cooperation, Professor Mayalik, I know it's difficult because every country has their own deficit. Is it going to happen, really?
The thing is that international cooperation with China is easier if you accept the culture and you want to become a friend, because it's a country who wants to hearing, to listen, and to do. Going back to the discussion you was with Haibo Wang, the countries in the world who have a system have a donors. China was not donors 10 years ago because they was not a system. When China implemented a system, it starts to be a donors. Let me explain my particular experience in some regions here in this country. I've been in the region of Kunming or Nanning,
in southwest part of China.
Well, we have been in the hospitals with the professionals. These people also have visited us and shared time. And when they implement at the hospital level, at the intensive care where the people die, the similar system, what you question, family understand that the body is death. Family understand and realize that after death, to help the others is a positive thing. And then if you look at the figures, it's one of the more advanced provinces in the territory, probably because they are more isolated, whatever, is more easier for them than a large city like Beijing or Shanghai, that they will come later, probably.
Well, as both of you just said, first day of 2015 last year is only the start of the new system. We're less than 2 years from the very beginning. It's going to be a grand new beginning. We hope it's going to be a beginning that would earn trust of the public and therefore a good beginning of a grand system. Thank you so much, Dr. Wang Haibo and also Professor Martin Mayalik.
Thank you very much.
Being with us,
谢谢.
gentlemen. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into our search engine. You'll be able to find us. I know you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world.